Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Around the World in 80 Days. I'm your host, Sean Keane. I would like to introduce a very special guest today, someone who is no longer a University of Iowa student, but a former University of Iowa student. She's recent enough. Malvika Khadiya, as always, I'm going to let her introduce herself and where she studied.
Yes, hi, great to be here. My name is Malvika. I studied through the CLS program in Daugavpils, Latvia, last summer. I graduated from the university last May. I studied Russian and political science here.
All right, so let's get right into it because Latvia is not a place that people usually go to study, although shout out Sean Hagen because he was on here. He went to Latvia as well.
Yes.
But you had a very specific program that brought you to Latvia, and that was because of your Russian and somewhat quasi your political science studies. But I would like for you to talk to us first about the program that brought you to Latvia.
Yes, so I went to Latvia through the Critical Language Scholarship Program, which is an intensive summer study program. They have a bunch of different languages. I was there through the Russian program, and so I actually didn't choose Latvia. They assign you a site. The other one was Kyrgyzstan this summer, I believe. But it's very intensive. We had 5 full days of class during the week. I know that's different than some study abroad programs. Our first day at the school, our director, Sergey, he told us, he comes up, very dry delivery, he comes up and he's like, some study abroad students, they travel and they go to parties and they have fun. And he looks at us dead in the eyes and says, not you.
Wow.
Yep.
Like a real, this is Russia kind of, even though it's not Russia, but this is Russia kind of vibe.
Yes, same kind of vibe. And so honestly, good thing right off the bat, we were like, okay, we're here for school. But it's a really good program. You stay with the host family, in our case, sometimes in a dorm, if people who are listening to this are interested in knowing that. But yeah, it's very intensive. It's very rewarding. I think all of us can say we made a ton of progress because you're very, very deeply immersed. All of your classes are in Russian. Our host parents didn't speak any English. So, sink or swim. Out in the town, everything was in Russian pretty much. I mean, almost everything in our case. So yeah, it's a great program. I encourage anyone to try it out, to apply.
So can you remind me the name of the town that you were in again? Because it's a very long name.
Yes, it's Daugavpils, which in Latvian basically means the city on the river Daugava. So we lived kind of right by the river.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when you had originally said you were going to Latvia to do this critical language scholarship, I was like, oh man, Riga seems nice, Riga, the capital of Latvia. And then you said the name, which I am not going to try to pronounce. So if I need the name, I'm just going to look at you and then have you say it. But you said the town. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So Latvia is somewhere very different from where you have traveled and been to before, at least from what I'm aware of your travels in our speaking before this. But what was it like to be in kind of just rural Latvia, but also, well, actually, no, let me move back. Let me start with the Russian. So how did you feel about your Russian as you graduated and were getting ready to go do this? Because Russian is very hard. So where were we at after however many years or semesters you took here at Iowa?
Yeah, that is a good question. One of the reasons I actually chose to do CLS was because it was very intensive immersion. My Russian before the program was it was conversational at a very basic level. So I knew grammar, I knew vocab, I could fill out a chart for you. But when it came to talking to someone in Russian, like a native speaker, I knew there was a limit pretty early on as far as I could go. And so through CLS, I came in with a good foundation. I knew that going in. I was like, I know the rules pretty well. I just need to know how to use them. And so that's where I was at going into the program. Definitely felt very, very different.
Even you need a chance. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, I was going to say even within the first 2 weeks, I was like, I feel much better. It does not petrify me to have someone come up and start talking in Russian.
You can perfectly and properly use all of, what is it, the 3 different words to describe the 3 different shades of blue that are separate colors or whatever?
I have a funny story about the colors.
Okay, talk to us about the colors.
Our first day, so the classes in CLS are very small. We had 5 people in mine. And so we were doing our introductions on the first day, and I, was very nervous because I felt like everyone's so good at Russian. I was like, I don't know where I match up here. And our teacher goes around and says, everyone tell me your favorite color. And at this moment, 2 things happened. My favorite color is orange, and I forgot about that. I forgot the word. I forgot the word for orange. I was like, oh, shoot. Second thing that happened is I decided I had to be honest. I couldn't just pick another color and say that's my favorite. So she got around to me, and I knew the fruit orange. And so I was like, let me just like guess. Let me put the fruit in the form that like the color adjective would be in and try it. And I said it, appelsinovi, and she looks at me and she's like, that's not a color. And I was like, well, do you know what I was trying to say? And she told me. And it was fine, and we laughed about it, but...
No one else from your cohort or anything had said orange before it?
No one had said orange, and I was hoping and praying that someone would, but there were only 3 people before me because it was so small. So I think we had like green, blue, green.
And I mean, you already said they were going hard with it too. There's no like, are you thinking about orange? Like they're like, no, you got to know what orange is.
Yeah. I remember when I said it and I was like, please be right. And she looked at me, she's like, that's not a color. And I was like, oh, I tried.
But those baby steps, those nice little baby steps that you get, because now what, if I asked you point blank, what's your favorite color in Russian, you could hit me with it, right?
Yes.
What's your favorite color in Russian?
Оранжевый.
There we go. It's
Yes.
orange, baby.
It's my redemption. Yeah.
Do you get that in Spanish too? Because you speak Spanish as well, with calling things naranja instead of anaranjado. Like something is the fruit orange versus something is orange colored.
Like I do still have to think about it sometimes. For a second, I'm like, which one? Which one is it? They are different. Yeah.
All right. So we've gotten down into Latvia now. You've already had a classic, let's call it study abroad experience,
It
TM.
had to happen.
But what about your family? Because again, you're in rural-ish Latvia, and you got dropped with a family who doesn't know any English, and you got to speak Russian, and obviously you're not going to get by with Latvian either, because if there's anything harder than learning Russian, it would be Latvian. So what was that like?
I remember, so we knew who our host families were before we went in. So I had their, names, and then their daughter's name, who actually turns out didn't live there, and their hobbies. So what I knew going in was that they were a bit of an older couple. They had a flower shop. My host mom's hobby, psychology. My host dad liked gardening. I was like walking in, I was like, that's all I know.
How does psychology be like a hobby? Not to interrupt again, but...
She was taking classes online.
Okay.
So that's what it was. So not quite what I would think of as a hobby, but I remember...
An interest.
Yes, an interest. We'll call it that. Because it was psychology and esotericism. And I remember looking at it and being like, I don't even know what that is.
And how am I supposed to explain it in Russian?
Yes. How do we hold a conversation about this over dinner? I got lucky because I had a roommate. They had a big house, and everyone on CLS gets their own bedroom. Like, that's a guarantee. So they had a spare bedroom. Their daughters were both out of the house. So my roommate, Paula, speaks much better Russian than me, like almost fluent. She was reading books in Russian the whole time.
So she can hold an esoteric conversation in Russian.
Exactly. So she could be the bridge sometimes when I would, come back after a day of class, we're talking over dinner and I just cannot remember a word. And I would look at her sometimes and be like, Paula, do you know how to say this? And she would be our go-between. But yeah, my host parents were super sweet. But yes, I think that's what I was probably most nervous about going. And I was excited for it because people, not always, but tend to really enjoy their host families. And especially the school that we were there through, people had said the host families were like the best part of being there. But yeah, Paul and I did find out at the airport that we were living together. They hadn't told us that before because I said, my host mom says her hobby's esotericism. I don't even know what that is. And she's like, my host mom said that.
Whoa, crazy, man.
Yeah, that's how we found out. But
did they like purposefully not tell you who your roommates were going to be? Were they just going to spring that on you just because?
Like, I think we might have just gotten off the bus at the house together and been like, why are you getting off the bus? I live here. But not everyone has a roommate. I think there were maybe 2 other people who did on our program because mostly in this town they were in like apartment buildings. But I think it helped me a lot to have her there, and just to kind of share that experience was very nice.
So when you weren't talking about esotericism in Russian, what were some instances or moments where you guys really did have both? Well, let's start with easy things that you found to talk about as you kind of went through your time, like school, dinner table conversations. But then also, what were some more difficult situations of, oh, shoot, how are we going to even talk about this?
Yeah. That's a good question. Easy ones off the bat were just them asking us about the U.S. They hadn't been here before, and so they would ask us about where we're from. I was telling them about Iowa. I think very different than what people imagine when they think of the U.S. there. But and we would ask them about, their life in Latvia before that. My host dad was in the military in the Soviet Union, and so he had traveled, lived in a lot of different places. So he would tell us stories. He was the cook of the house. He cooked in the military, and so he would tell us, Paul and I would feel bad. He was like doing dishes, so we would like try to go help, and he was like, I did the dishes in the military. Like, he was like, I can do this. Go up to your room. Like, go do something else. It's fine. So those were the easier ones to talk about. And then just, how was your day? We talk about fashion with our host mom. She also was taking classes to become a stylist.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a fun thing to talk about. We'd go shopping, come back, show her, like, look at what we got. But harder ones were, and we didn't get too far into this, but just anything political was pretty sticky. Daugavpils is majority ethnically Russian, and since the Ukraine war especially, that's kind of been a tension. And so, like, if you're out in the city, for example, almost everybody speaks Russian. Like, you start talking in Latvian, especially older people are not going to know what you're saying to them. But everything that was written anywhere, the bus, like, announcements, all of that was in Latvian. And
which I believe is by law purposefully in Latvia.
Yes, yeah. And so that was something we had to be mindful of anytime that our host dad was talking about, like, the history of the Soviet Union or would, start talking about current events. We were told basically by the program, just don't get into it. And I really did want to have a good relationship with my host parents. So I was like, I'm not going to argue. I'm at a language disadvantage already, so I'm not sure I can even make a point.
But also the political science in you was like dying to talk about it, I'm sure.
Yes, it would have been so cool. But I did just enjoy taking in what he was telling us, just the stories that he had from his time in the Soviet Union, and that kind of perspective was very interesting to hear because it's something that, I hadn't really gotten a lot of beforehand.
So it's funny that you had like fashion conversations and things with your host mom. We, of course, have a very good friend, Andy. He was my roommate, obviously, or my roommate when we went to Spain together, obviously. You guys have had classes together and have known each other for a long time. So we did not have fashion conversations with our host parents in Spain, although Carmen, our host mom, we did both agree that she was super well dressed. Like, she had amazing outfits, and we could usually get around with the conversations that we had. There wasn't anything particular, but there was this one time, and I don't know if you had a specific event about this. The washing machine was broken, and Carmen needed our help fixing the washing machine. And like, I'm good at Spanish. I'm way better now. I was like good at Spanish then, like classroom good at Spanish. And I usually spoke for both Andy and myself. But Carmen's asking us how to fix the washing machine. I'm like, I don't even know how to say these things in English, much less in Spanish. But like, we got to get this thing washed because we're almost at the end of our laundry week. And Andy and I only had a week's worth of clothes too. So like this is mission critical. And I remember there was a very like just torrented afternoon of Google Translate, Andy Google translating, me relaying, us having to like hold the washing machine out and like make sure the pipes were okay while we were trying to fix this ourselves. And that was one of the ones where I was just like, I know that they want us to be immersed and I know that they want us to really understand this, but like, I need English or a Spanish mechanic. Please, we cannot be expected to fix the washing machine, much less in Spanish.
Yeah. No, that would be crazy. We didn't get quite that into the weeds with the fashion talk. So it was what we could manage, but no, that would be crazy. I can't think of a situation like that where I was like, I'm in way over my head right now. My host parents did. We would pull out the Google Translate sometimes too if it was like a really specific word or something, or I was like, I just need to tell you this thing. We're going to use this and keep going. But yeah, no, I can't think of anything crazy like that. But I think that if that was me, I would have definitely been looking to Paul and been like, can you help me? Because I don't know what's going on right now.
Because Andy and I were both like, yo, we tried.
Yeah.
If it's fixed, it's fixed. If all of our clothes get dyed like pink or something the next time we wash it, we tried. So the home life sounds like it was, super chill for just what you had other than just desperately wanting to talk politics with host dad. I don't know. I might have broken protocol. If I was him, I would have picked the brain. But talk about your classes, because you said you were in classes 5 days a week, super intensive, all in Russian. Like, what was that like? What were you doing in those classes?
Yeah. So we had kind of our homeroom classes. So there were 5 of us there. Our teacher, Larissa, she was really great at getting us engaged and kind of getting us out of our shell, because it is so small that you have to participate. Like, there's no chance of hiding in the back or anything. So our morning from 8 a.m. to, I'd say, about 11:30 noon was with her. So we actually did not do a lot of, like, studying grammar or anything like that, which I expected. It was a lot more of, for example, every week we'd read, like, an article, and they would be about the most random things. One was about hiking. And so I was looking up every third word because it would be like very specific terminology. And I was like, I don't even know what this is in English. Like now I got to go look up a picture of this thing, figure it out. So we did that. Those would come with their own exercises. So we would do those in class. Sometimes we did presentations. So they would be like Russian movies or Russian songs. Like you pick something, you talk about it to the class. 3 times a week we did news presentations. So you'd go find a Russian language news site, make your own little presentation about it. Our first, I think, time or 2 times we got to have slides up with us with text. By the end of it, it was look at your notebook before and walk up. And sometimes she would even have us like switch with a partner. So you'd hand each other your notebooks. You get a second to read over what they had. Then you go up and talk about their story.
That is brutal.
Very, very intense. She made it, I will say she did a good job of making it like fun and not scary, but sometimes I'd walk up there and I'd be like, oh my God, someone help me.
Malvika, we're trying to convince people to do this, okay?
And I'm telling you I made it out alive, so you'll be fine if you're listening to this. But we did that, and then I think my favorite thing, which was also just got super bizarre sometimes, is we would do these speeches. So they had a split by language level, but there were 2 classes that were, mine and the other one were pretty much the same. And so our classes would get together once or twice a week, and one person from each class, you were paired together and you would have to give a speech about just something. And they were very strange. One was you were assigned different topics to like persuade your audience to like give you a grant for in whatever X number of dollars. So I remember one of them was not the one that I had, but it was like funding study abroad for young kids. So that was interesting. One time we had, is it hard to live with a not ordinary person? And we kept trying to ask, we were like, what's a not ordinary person? This feels like it could get problematic. And our teachers were like, it can mean whatever you want it to mean. Just do whatever you want. And we were like, And I learned an interesting phrase through that, žít s freakom, like to live with a freak. We decided to go a very safe route with it. But that's kind of what our classes with her looked like. And then in the afternoons, we had a couple of Latvian language classes, our first, I want to say 3-4 weeks there.
So you're getting a 2 for 1.
2 for 1. I didn't really learn much in that because it was like late in the day and we'd get in from our like full day of Russian and our teacher, again, was trying to, I think, immerse us, but we had nothing to go from. So we'd sit there and just listen to the song or something. But it was interesting because she would talk about, her daughter abroad, whatever. And then we had history classes, history of Latvia, history of Belarus, which was 20 minutes away, the region. And then we had conversation partners, which I know is some other study abroad programs do. CLS, that's one of their like main things. So 4 times a week you were paired with somebody. All of my partners were high school students about to start college, and so that was a nice thing to kind of talk about. They were super curious what is like college like in the U.S., and I would ask them, what are you planning to do? Most of them are going to Riga. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what our days look like, and those things, they would cycle them through the week. But yeah, classes, I will say they gave us like an hour, 45-minute break for lunch. So that was really nice in the midday when your brain was just like fried and you couldn't think anymore. We'd go out for lunch, go to a coffee shop, do some homework, break out of school mode for a bit, and then go back and be recharged.
As intense as that sounds, that also sounds so fun and invigorating and rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I also, the people at our school, everyone that was like managing the program, so nice, put us at ease very quickly. Communication was excellent, I will say, because I know that some of my friends who have studied abroad, people I know, have had trouble with that from like sometimes if the program's not being managed well, like everything gets stressful. Our program was so punctual that if we were on a weekend excursion, they said, you're going to be back at 5. I would check the clock. The bus was pulling in the school lot at 5 o'clock on the dot every time. It was crazy. Very, very punctual. But I think one of the highlights was that it's a very like cohort-based experience. And it had people from all over the U.S., but we got really lucky that pretty much everyone in our cohort like got along really well. And so that made it a lot easier to even get through like some of the tougher things that happened in the program. It was very, very rewarding.
So what did you learn, and I'm going to pick your brain, just political scientist to political scientist here, when you were consuming like a lot of Russian language, presumably like Russian or Belarusian state media too, for the different things? Like what was that perspective change like?
That's a good question because the sources that our teacher kind of pointed us to as far as Russian language, I think the views in those were pretty aligned with our own. So I don't remember seeing anything that seemed like overly pro-Russia. But when we were just kind of out and about and hearing people talk and things, you'd hear things sometimes. I remember one time someone was saying that like, well, Latvia's not really like a quote unquote real country. They didn't even exist until, like 100 years ago, and they were occupied, and they've only been a country since the 90s. Like, what's the big deal? Sometimes people would complain about like, oh, we all speak Russian. Like, why do we have to have Latvian everywhere? And I have my own views on that, but it was interesting to just see people in real life, because in the U.S., I think I would mostly, if I heard anything like this, it would be online, and so it's just different. But to see people that you interact with, people that you think are like nice, normal people, say that, and to kind of hear them like get into their reasoning, there was a fair bit of like Soviet Union nostalgia from people. I remember
back in the Union, baby.
Back in the Soviet Union. I remember one thing someone said. I think it was our teacher, actually. Larissa said this. She was like, some people have this nostalgia because when you graduated college in the Soviet Union, you were guaranteed a job right out. You'd be given like an assignment. I think it was for 5 years. They would send you somewhere. She was like, you never had to worry about looking for a job, because a lot of us were graduating. We talked about that as like, got to go back to the U.S., figure this out. The pensions, I remember my host dad talked about that. He was like, my grandmother retired in her 50s. She had a great pension. She got to live out her life. Like, she didn't have to work till she was, 70. And so I think it was a really good opportunity to kind of have an open mind to at least take in like the perspectives that people had and kind of their lived experiences in the Soviet Union especially. That was really interesting.
I am glad that you were able to experience and see that firsthand, because I've talked about this before with my experience in Chile of, like you said, like the dictatorship, Soviet Union, like nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's so real. We can sit here and look at books and read about books or other news sources or people and just be like, whatever, because we're not living that. But being able to live amongst and talk with people who, they're not bad people.
Exactly.
But their lives and their views under something that we only understand abstractly. Now, of course, this is not me justifying any autocratic dictatorship, the Soviet, like anything, but like that, and again, political scientist to political scientist, is so eye-opening. And that's an experience I think that everyone who goes into these fields should really have, and especially someone who was on the fringes of the Soviet Union too.
Yes.
Not like a Russian who lived in the Russian Federation or the Russian Republic of the Soviet Union, but like a Russian living in Latvia during the Soviet Union.
Yeah. I don't want to make this dark, so I won't get into the details too much, but our first day of the program we spent in Riga, because that's where we flew into before we took the bus out. And one of the first things they did was take us to a museum about the Latvian occupation. And I mean, honestly, it's one of my like top 10 museums I've ever been through. It was very like well designed, interactive, but it was very eye opening to see just how, like, I had a textbook understanding of the Soviet Union and how oppressive it was, but it was very interesting to see people's like stories about it. And I remember something that stood out to me. Our tour guide said that when she was growing up, because she was, I think, born in like the 80s. So she was like, I remember my grandmother, she's still afraid to talk about anything serious over the phone because she was so scared of that. And she was like, I remember seeing my grandmother like afraid of that as a kid. I was like, it kind of puts how recent that was into perspective. There was information about, mass deportations, forced deportations from the Baltic states that happened to kind of destroy like the culture and the language. And so that was, from a political science perspective, that was super interesting to just kind of be in the middle of and be in this weird, especially in Daugavpils, like it's Latvia, and Latvia had its own fight for independence, but then you also have sometimes this like very pro-Russian and this very Russian population that kind of saw things differently, had this nostalgia. So I think one thing I did learn was to kind of hold my judgment on a lot of things. If someone said something and off the bat I was like, what are you talking about? And then I'd be like, let's hear them out at least. Like there's something to learn from it for sure.
Absolutely. And again, these kinds of experience, like these are the learning things that whenever you do these, you should be taking from them. And it's the ones that you maybe are expecting to maybe be on like the periphery of, but you're not expecting them. So then when you get into them, like those have the biggest impact right away. Just being able to have a random conversation about the glory days of the Soviet Union. So let's talk about Daugavpils. Is that?
Yeah.
I got it. Let's go.
Daugavpils, yes.
So let's talk about just being in Daugavpils, because you had an hour and 45 minutes for lunch. I'm sure you had plenty of time to get to know the town and to just understand the people there.
Yeah.
And while all the official stuff was in Latvian, what was it like to just be around in this place that was all Russian, but also not in Russia or Belarus, and then obviously no English to be found?
Yeah. I will say this is a conversation because we had 3 free weekends. So 2 of them we traveled to Riga on, like just the students. This was something we talked about after we came back, is that Daugavpils was fairly small. It was a small town, not a very big young population. A lot of young people, would leave the city, go to Riga, or oftentimes go out of the country. And so we went to Riga and we came back and we were like, this is actually such a great city for what we're doing because it's small enough that everything felt manageable. And so we kind of got a lay of the land pretty quickly. We had a tour from the school. It's a very old city. One of the landmarks that they showed us it's called Church Hill. It's a hill that it has a Russian Orthodox church. It had, I think, a Lutheran church and 2 others, and I don't remember for sure the denomination, so I won't say. But there was just so much history in the city, and there was a fortress that they showed us the history of. Through different wars, it became like a Soviet school for pilots or in the military. And so it was just a city where you could see a lot of Latvia's history just like condensed right there. People were very nice. Again, not the most exciting place. There were, I think, like 2 nightclubs. There was a bar next to our school. There were a couple of restaurants that we would kind of cycle between. One thing that I did enjoy, which I think is like a holdover from the Soviet Union, when we would go out for lunch during the week, almost every restaurant had a business lunch. And so it was a fixed price. It was, I think, about €6-ish every time. You would get a soup of the day, a main. You'd have like 2 or 3 choices to pick from. Fixed price, you'd walk in, you were in and out like 20, 30 minutes tops because they'd have it all ready. That's something I was a huge fan of when I came back because I was like, I loved after hours of classes just walking in, having 2 choices, and they were like, here are your options, and I would just pick one, and they're like, great.
That Soviet Union efficiency, man.
It was so quick, and I was like, I don't have to like read a menu and be like, oh my God, I don't know what it's saying, because the menus oftentimes would be in Latvian.
Well, I was going to ask, like, what was it like having to sit in front of a menu that's in both Russian or Latvian, and knowing words for very non-specific foods is already hard enough.
Yeah.
But like, just sitting back and looking at that, so at least you could be like, point that one, boom.
Yes. There was a fair bit of guesswork. Honestly, especially when it didn't happen too often, but sometimes the menu would just be in Latvian, no Russian. And so we figured out the words for kind of like chicken and different things. And sometimes you would just, like, for example, ordering business lunch, there was no physical menu. So they would come up and tell you, here are your 2 options in Russian, very quick. And so sometimes I would be listening and I'd be like, okay, I heard fish in that one. I don't like fish. So I'm going to just do the other one and see what it is. 9 times out of 10 works out fine. But we did also become friends with the Google Translate, like the picture, we just pull out our phone sometimes and be like, I don't know Latvian. I'm just going to take a picture. Google's going to help me figure out what's going on here. And then, hope for the best.
Well, and that's another part of the study abroad experience too, is always being in a situation where you order something that you don't mean to. So then you just kind of have to go and eat it anyway, because what are you going to do? Ask for it back in the broken language that you already messed up the first time in? Like,
yeah, I didn't order this. They'll be like, you did. To my face. I luckily never ended up with anything like shocking, but I remember one time, and I still don't even know what this sauce was, but it was like a chicken dish, and it had this like Pepto-Bismol pink sauce over it.
Oh no.
And she brought it out, and a couple of us had ordered it because it was, one of 2 options. We looked at it and we were like, what is that? And it wasn't even like a very strong flavor. Like, I was worried it was going to be like strawberry or something, just from the color of it. I was like, I don't know what that is. To this day, I have no idea what that was. I imagine there was beetroot powder or something in it that gave it the color, and it was like something normal. But I can guarantee you that when she came up and read us the options, she said what that sauce was, and we guessed. We were like, we'll do the chicken.
We'll do the chicken. Whatever sauce gets thrown on.
Whatever you've done to the chicken, we'll find out about later. But yeah.
I'm sure you've probably had this experience in like speaking Spanish and going to Spanish-speaking countries too. Like, I'll be translating the menu, and then we'll get to like a sauce or something. I'm like, I don't know. We're going to order it, and we're going to see what comes out with it. And if it's Pepto-Bismol pink, I guess we have to eat it.
I guess we're trying something new.
But that would kind of scare me, because I'm pretty open when it comes to eating most foods, but like bright pink.
Yeah.
Yeah. But were they cool with you just being like, oh, here comes the Americans? Because I'm sure they got pretty familiar with you pretty quickly. Like,
oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the other thing I should have mentioned with Daugavpils. It was small enough, and it was the summer, so the university was, not having classes. And so people did, yes, they learned who we were. And our school, it was just a language school. And so there was our group, but there was also a group from Arizona State, and there was a group of, the State Department does like a youth language program too, so their group was there as well at the same time as us. So between the three of us, I think that everyone in like the downtown area knew that the Americans were here. And so they definitely, at some of those restaurants, they knew who we were when we walked in. And so we would ask them, like, could you repeat that, please? And they would slow down and they would give it to us. Sometimes they would try to switch to English, but for the most part, people in Daugavpils didn't speak English, which, was a benefit for our learning. But sometimes it was like, oh, okay.
I don't want to jump away from food because I was going to ask about food, but you talking about having a conversation partner and then people trying in English. So we'll get back to food, but talk about the conversation partner thing real quick, because when people have or programs have conversation partners, usually for a lot of the study abroads, it's like English or Spanish or French or, like Japanese or something, pretty well enough known languages, or you can kind of just work your way through it. But what was it like having a Russian conversation, maybe with a little bit of Latvian thrown in, and very much less expectation of English getting used as a middleman?
Yeah, it was daunting. And it was something that I'd forgotten was part of the program until we got there. And they were like, this is actually 4 days a week. And so I was like, I'm in trouble. But our conversation partners, mine were very young, so I don't think they had done it before. But most of the people who were working as conversation partners had worked with students before. So they kind of had an idea of how to have a conversation and, how to stick to easier topics. But I had 3 conversation partners. Most of my time was with Maria. She was from Ukraine, actually.
Okay.
So she didn't speak Latvian. She also spoke just a little bit of English, but they were told, I think, from right off the bat, do not speak English with these kids. They were like, they might try, don't humor them.
Make them suffer.
Yes. And so we ended up becoming pretty close friends because we could bond over, for example, struggling to study Latvian in the first couple of weeks. Because she was like, I took classes too when I got here first time, gave up. It's very hard. And just being similar ages. But I would ask her about, what her life was like in Ukraine before. And she would ask about the U.S. I found out she wants to see crocodiles, so she wanted to go to Florida.
Okay.
I was like, not what I would have guessed you were going to answer, but honestly, yes, you should do that. That, very cool thing to do. But yeah, no, we would go for walks. We would just walk around. The weather was fairly nice most of the time. So we'd, get our steps in, get outside. Some people's conversation partners, they would, go to coffee shops and hang out or do different errands. If someone had to go buy something and they, were worried about it. One of my conversation partners took me to a grocery store once. It was one of the really huge ones, and I walked in and I was like, oh my God, this is a wonderland. I want everything. But yeah, it was, I think, in terms of language learning, one of the most helpful parts of the program because the pressure of the classroom was off. And you could tell your partner, it was a lot easier to tell your partner than a teacher that I have no idea what you just said. Can you maybe say it differently or can you slow down this time? But no, it was great. And everyone had different experiences with their conversation partners, but it was a very rewarding part of the program. And, people you can stay in touch with later, which is always nice. So. And
they'll teach you the fun words that the school won't let you be taught, or your host family might be like, come on,
They're like, you can go look it up, guys. We're not telling you about that. Yeah, for sure.
So I have 2 anecdotes related to your person wanting to see crocodiles.
Okay.
And if you're still in contact with her, you can tell him you can eat crocodile too. It tastes like chicken. I had it when I was in Louisiana, but when Andy and I were in Spain, there was a girl there. She was from St. Andrews in Scotland, so she wasn't a conversation partner. But we were just kind of talking, what's it like in Scotland? Have you ever been to the U.S.? And I always like to ask people when we're talking about the U.S. or coming to the U.S., I'm like, okay, besides New York and L.A. and Miami, if I'm talking to Latinos, where is somewhere that you want to go? Because I want to just see kind of what the knowledge past that is. And this girl from St. Andrews said to me, possibly the most random known city that you could think of wanting to go to. And that city was Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio? What did she want?
And I was like, you what?
What was her reason?
There's a band that she likes that's from Dayton, Ohio. And like, look, I've been to Dayton, Ohio. Dayton, Ohio is a nice place. Like, it's not bad, but there's not really a whole lot to do there. And also, like, Cincinnati's right there, and Cincinnati's really nice. So I was like, that's not, I don't know what to tell you. If you want to go to Dayton, I wouldn't say waste a trip going to the U.S., but like, if you want to waste, quote unquote, a trip,
if you're going to fly 10 hours,
might as well go to Dayton, Ohio while you're at it. And then the other one, I think I've told this story on here before. We've gotten to the point where I've lost track of all of the related anecdotes.
Sure.
So Andy and I were traipsing around Andorra for a day, and we were in the museum of like their parliamentary house or whatever, and it was super cool. And we were asking a woman attendant there, like, hey, I was asking in Spanish because I'm like, I don't know what language we're going to have to front with, Catalan, Spanish, French. So I'm fronting in Spanish, and she sees it very clearly, like we're having problems with the Spanish. So she switches to English. I'm like, oh, cool. All right. And so we were just speaking, and she's a super educated person. Like, she speaks 5 languages. She went to school in Andorra, which is very rare, but she also had gone to school in like Germany, I believe, and just super educated. And she was like, yeah, I would love to go to the US, mostly to, practice my English, but I want to go to the US and when she said this, I almost fell on the floor. She goes, I want to go to Des Moines, Iowa.
What?
And I was like, how do you even know that exists? You're in Andorra. You're in a country that nobody knows exists, and you want to go to Des Moines? And do you want to know why she went to Des Moines?
Why?
Or wanted to go to Des Moines? She was a huge Slipknot fan.
I'm going to save it for the end. That's going to come up later.
Okay.
That's crazy, though.
I am anxious to know what that is. But she was a huge Slipknot fan. I was like, oh my God. I can't even express it now, but like,
that is so funny.
How in this place that nobody knows and that nobody goes to, and you want to go to the place that's 2 hours from where we're from? That's nuts. She was over the moon at the fact that we were from Iowa too, and like we know about Des Moines. And I also was like, I personally am not a fan of Des Moines. Sorry to all my friends who are from Des Moines. I'm like, you should just come to Iowa City, like, know.
Yeah.
But then the other place she wanted to go to was Milwaukee. I was like, that's interesting. Milwaukee's nice. I like Milwaukee, but Chicago's right there, and Minneapolis as well. So I'm like, why Milwaukee? And she's like, I really was invested in the Jeffrey Dahmer docuseries. And I was like, oh. All right.
That's new. That's a new one. I've never heard that before.
We're like killing it on the reasons to go to random Midwest towns in the U.S. Like, we're 2 for 2 here.
Yeah.
She didn't have any other things because like she wanted us to go to New York, go to L.A., all that kind of stuff.
Course.
But I was waiting for like this crazy third shoe to drop.
That is so impressive that she even those were top of mind for her.
I was waiting for her to say like, oh, I read a book that took place in Omaha, Nebraska, and I just like have to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was my very long-winded but somewhat related anecdote to kind of what you were talking about with I want to go see crocodiles.
She and I had 3, and one of the other conversation partners I had 2 wanted to go to Florida, and I don't remember why, but I remember it was not Miami. I remember it was not, because the first time I went, she said Florida. I was like, oh, like Miami. I was like go clubbing, whatever. She was like, no, I want to see a crocodile. And the second one had something, I don't even remember what it was. I remember it was something that caught me off guard too. I was like, Florida 2 times. No one said New York. No one ever said LA.
But Florida and not for Miami.
Not for Miami, no. And I was like, you know what? Objectively, the crocodiles, they are pretty cool, but I have never even thought of the animals. When I think of a country that I want to go to, I've never thought of an animal first. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perspective maybe on like what's worth doing in the U.S.
Yeah. Gotta go see the crocodiles. I never had, when talking about the U.S., it was never the animals. It was always the weather. Were your conversation partners very curious about the weather because in all the places that I've gone to, all the conversation partners were so curious about the weather, specifically snow, but like the weather.
Yes, actually. And it's funny because Daugavpils, in Iowa, like the weather changes every like 10 seconds.
It's supposed to snow by the end of the week.
Exactly. Like I can't keep up. Daugavpils was the same way, at least in the summer. And I think people said it's not normal, but it would. Our first week or two was like super cold, like unseasonably. It was raining all the time. It was like 60 degrees. We weren't ready. We were like, it's June. It's supposed to be hot. Later on, then every day would get super, super hot and humid, would randomly downpour in the middle of the day, and then would get like cold. And I remember a couple times I said to someone, I was like, this reminds me of home. And they were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, the weather. Like, I don't know what's going to happen ever. I was like, this is just like home. And so they would ask about that. I remember explaining tornadoes to a couple people. I think she knew like loosely what they were, but I was explaining, I was a meteorology nerd as a kid. And so I was explaining like all the time, like how bad they can be. And she was like, that's crazy. You live there? She was like, have you seen one? I was like, not yet. Fingers crossed. I don't actually, because they're scary, but
I kind of hope that I get to talk about that. Like if I get to talk to another person about what the weather is like, because I've actually lived through 3 tornadoes. Yeah. Including one where it wasn't even close to us, but it was close enough to where I thought like something might like actually happen, either like my home or like me.
oh my God.
But I don't know if I ever talked about tornadoes.
Yeah. It was just for whatever reason, it was like top of mind for me, but because they mostly happen in the U.S. And so I was curious. I was like, do you even know what this is? And she like knew from a movie or TV or something. But yeah, I mean, it's worth talking about because it's we're almost in Tornado Alley. So
Yeah, that is wild. I don't even know if I'll ever get in one of these conversations again, like in this specific setting, but I'm like back pocketing these different things. They might think I'm crazy, just being like, yo, hey, so what you know about tornadoes, alligators, Slipknot, like we got to talk.
Slipknot, yes. Yeah.
But I think as high school students too, they were probably about to go into college.
Yes.
Like that was really rewarding for them to be able to know about tornadoes too.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about hurricanes too. I was like, I've never seen one, but
yeah,
with Florida, I was like, be careful when you go. There's hurricanes, and she was like, oh yeah, I've heard about those.
I would much rather have tornadoes than hurricanes. I'll say that now. I'll go on the record for that, but maybe neither.
Yeah, neither would be ideal, but there's always something.
There is always something. So our little tangent of conversation partners and what that was like, I want to throw us back forward to the food. So what is the Latvian food game like?
Good question. Not a lot of surprises, I will say. It's mild. Nothing was like spicy ever. I think I had a potato a day. There was soup. In the business lunch, first course, always soup. And even when it was like super, super hot, you had a hot soup every day. Soup always served with sour cream in it.
Oh.
And the first time I had it was my host parents, when we had dinner, put the soup down and he said, put sour cream in it. And I was looking at it, I was like, hot and cold. What? Why would I put sour cream in the soup? And he was like, just try it once. And I was like, okay, well, stirred it in. It actually works. Because the soup itself is like a clear broth that's very light. So you mix in the sour cream, it just makes it a little bit like thicker.
Does it work for like multiple soups or just a specific soup?
Almost every soup that we had there had sour cream in it. So I think most soups, definitely like in the US, like a chicken noodle, that's the kind of thing that they would have thrown some sour cream in.
I'm going to call that weird just because I have a lack of a better...
Try it once.
I don't hate the play. I'm just kind of like sour cream and a whole bunch of soup as like a thickening agent.
Yeah. Maybe it was the summer. There was summer soups. Maybe they were like, it'll cool it a little bit. I don't know exactly what the reasoning was, but it did work. I think it worked.
Were there any fun like Latvian, maybe not meals, but just like foods of like candy or different products or specific like Latvian drinks that you ever encountered or anything that you're particularly thinking about?
Yeah, I will say I don't know how many of these were like Latvian as opposed to Russian just because of all the mixing. But when we would go out for lunch, there was almost always like the fruit compote drink. And the color was very intense. I remember it was like very intense red, and I was like, what is that? And she was like, it's compote. And I was like, it looks scary. It's very nice. It's refreshing. It's like not too strong a flavor. I'm not super adventurous with drinks, but the food, their like pastries, their sweets were really good. And every coffee shop had a little bakery in it, a lot of berries. And I love like raspberries. And there are a lot of berries that grow there in the summer. So everything had like fresh berries in it. So that was pretty delicious. They also have a lot of mushrooms. So I remember one day our host dad invited Paul and I. He was like, if you guys aren't busy, like tomorrow evening, whenever it was, he was like, I'm going to go to the forest and get some mushrooms for dinner. And I was like, going to the forest for mushrooms? What? And he was like, yeah, like we do that in the summer. There's mushrooms growing. You just go pick them. And we ended up not going because he was like, there's too many bugs and it's muddy and you guys should just stay home. He brought them back. They were pretty good. But those, I think, were two like very Latvian like summer things, like the berries and the mushrooms, because they were just growing in the forest, and we were in like a rural enough area that people would just go out and pick some, bring them home, eat them for dinner. Very fresh, very healthy.
That sounds so fun. I can't think of two more diverse plant things that you can eat and pick to have in the same season and be like your main thing. But were the mushrooms like the morel mushrooms we have here, or were they? What kind of mushroom we talking about?
Oh, I actually don't really know the names of mushrooms. They were like small, kind of skinny and yellow.
And yellow. So, do they have like a bunch of like holes in them? Do they have like a holy pattern? Because those are the morel mushrooms that usually grow around here.
They didn't have holes, I don't think. They had kind of like, I was on like a frilly kind of like a kale kind of edge.
Interesting.
At the top. Yeah, I don't even think I have a picture, but
we can research.
Maybe someone can figure this out later.
We can research later for sure. So going out of Daugavpils, let's talk about Riga and just kind of the rest of Latvia that you experienced. I would imagine that Riga is very much different than your nice little Russian village in the bottom. So what was it like being in the more Latvian, quote unquote, environment and the big city?
It was very different. One thing that stood out, almost no Russian. Almost no Russian. People spoke English. I remember that this was something we had to be mindful of, was especially outside of Daugavpils, when we wanted to speak Russian versus when it was better to just stick to English and not, you don't want to offend anyone, stir anything up. That was more important. And I remember I wasn't there when it happened, but someone else in my cohort was trying to speak Russian to someone in Riga, and the person turned around and like very calmly, like was not like, aggressive or anything, but they were like, you're in Latvia, so either speak to me Latvian or English, but not Russian. And so, but Riga was a lot of fun for us. There was, a lot more to do, a lot more restaurants, things. You could go. We had a curfew in Daugavpils, which actually didn't end up becoming an issue because I wouldn't say there was much to do past 8 p.m. So that was fun. And it was a good chance, because we were in school and doing homework like all the time in Daugavpils, for us as a cohort to just kind of spend time together outside of that environment. So we went to museums. There was one that was the KGB's like former interrogation detention center in Riga. It's called the Corner House. I went with one other person. We walked around. It's very small, and I do think if anyone's ever in Riga, it's worth visiting, because they have a ton of information about like the resistance movements that happened at that time. You go into a room, you can see the bullet holes. So it's very intense. There's a tour that I didn't do, but they show you even more of it.
Is it the one where you can like pay to be fake interrogated by the KGB or something? Because isn't it like Latvia or Estonia that has that as like a thing that you can do?
Yeah. I'm not sure that it's this place, although I could be wrong, because it was kind of a last second. Paula had actually told, she was like, when I was in Riga last, that's something that I did that was cool. So it might be. Otherwise, I do know what you're talking about. We didn't end up doing that. But yeah, no, Riga's very fun. The old town is very pretty. There's a street that's like all kind of Art Nouveau like architecture. So you can walk down. It's got a bunch of embassies on it, but you can walk down and just take that in. It's very green. It's a very quiet city. Like people in Latvia in general were just very quiet. And it's funny because that was the first time that people say Americans are loud. They're like, when you're abroad, they're like, you can spot. And I never quite got it, because I was like, I don't feel like I'm that loud. We'd be out in a restaurant or something and like talking amongst ourselves as we do at a normal volume for us. And someone would eventually like look back and look at us and be like, guys, we need to bring it way down. We're the loudest people here. But yeah, Riga was beautiful, and I wish I had more time there, but it's definitely somewhere I'd go back to visit. Yeah.
I would like to, at the very least, just see Riga, just to say that I've been there. I've heard that Riga is very nice. I would also like to look at political scientist to political scientist, the politics of Riga and Latvia and how that shapes what the rest of Latvia is, especially in relation to the community that you were living in.
Yes.
The like almost pro versus anti-Riga Latvian divide that you have there.
Yes. Yeah. It was very interesting. It was something that you could kind of, if you were looking for it, you could pick up on it like everywhere. even you walk into a restaurant, you see what languages they put on the menu. So it was, that was a highlight for sure.
So we're going to start closing out here, but you had said that you had a story that you were backpocketing for later regarding Slipknot. So
this has to do with my song, so I don't know if we're there yet.
Okay, all right.
But
all
if
right,
we are, I can...
if it has to do with your song, then we'll hold that one back. So I would say, give us, what is your biggest pieces of advice to people who are pursuing Russian, who are pursuing a CLS, who are pursuing a program like this, or just, thinking about going to Latvia, like we all do think about go to Latvia.
Of course. You won't believe how many times I was surprised by this. I would tell someone in the U.S. I was going to Latvia, and they were like, what is that? Which I think because I'd also taken a class, Ambassador McMullen's class, I knew where it was. So anyway, that was kind of funny going in. But advice for studying Russian, I'm going to start with that, because that was something that before I started, I was very hesitant of, because Russian, and I think it earns its reputation to an extent. It's a hard language. I think that you get access to a lot of literature and a lot of different cultures through Russian, because pretty much anywhere in like the post-Soviet region, it will help you to know it. And so I would say for anyone who's thinking of studying Russian or studying Russian and is struggling, seems miserable and ridiculous, all the rules, stick with it. And what I will say is it's a very logical language. It has rules, but then it follows them. Which I've always said, having to study English as a second language would be my worst nightmare, because there's rules and they don't matter.
Well, not to cut you off, but like as someone who's studied Spanish and been in that environment and taken like other language grammar classes, I realized the same thing. Like studying English as a second language is an absolute nightmare.
Yes.
How do we speak this language, and why did we make it the most dominant one in the world?
I have brand new respect for people who actually go learn English later, because I'm like, I don't think I'm strong enough.
100%.
Yeah. But then I would also say for people thinking of doing CLS, because again, this was a situation where it's very selective, and they never give you an official stat on the acceptance rate or anything. It's hard to get into, but I would say that almost everyone in my cohort, when we would talk about it later, we all were like, we applied and then we just forgot about it, because we were like, it's not going to happen. But I applied and whatever, it's done. And eventually you get the email, you're in. You're like, oh my God, what happened? So I would say you don't know what they're looking for. So there's no harm in applying. Give it a shot. Be honest. Be yourself. And if you don't get in, you don't get in. But if you do, it's such an amazing experience. And unlike anything else. So.
And it applies to not only just Russian, but also languages like Turkish, Arabic,
yes.
Portuguese. Again, I think like Indonesian or something was one of them.
Arabic, Hindi. Yeah, CLS has tons of languages. So, yeah. Again, no harm in trying. It's not even a very long application. So, you could knock it out in a day. I know some people who did that.
And then end up spending your summer in Latvia learning Russian.
Yes. And the other thing is, it's a study abroad program that's fully paid for. So they pay for everything while you're there, and then you get a stipend. So I will say it's a pretty good deal that way too. Your flights are covered. You're very well taken care of.
You got nothing to lose.
You have nothing to lose. If you get it, like, it's very easy to apply, and then if you get in, it's fantastic. It's a great experience. So
might lose your sanity just a little bit with the workload, but that's part of the process. Like,
and you're gonna come home and you're still gonna be so nostalgic over it. So
you're gonna be nostalgic about living in the former Soviet Union under the great efficiency there and the efficiency that we do not have.
Christmas lunches, yes. Latvia, the sun is out almost over 12 hours. I'm saying 14, 16 hours a day in the summer. So
do they have
it's a fun experience.
Air conditioning there?
Oh, I'm glad you brought it up. No, they didn't.
Okay.
So it would get very hot, and they also don't put screens on the windows. This is a culture shock that I think it happens every time I travel and I forget about it, because it's such an ordinary thing. But because it was an extended period, my room, we were kind of in like an attic situation, and so we had skylights instead of like windows that open, but there was no screen on them. And so it would get super hot in the summer. The sun is out at like 9, 10 p.m. There's no air conditioning. You'd be trying to go to bed. You open your skylight, and then you hear wasps like buzzing around in your room. I'd forgotten about that until just now. So you'll survive it if you're in the same boat. But yes, there's no screens on windows, and I've never appreciated that more about the U.S.
That sounds like it would be bug hell, because that's one of the things. Screens slightly less, but air conditioning. I always try to be respectful of other people's cultures when I'm going to places. I understand. I really try to understand the privilege and the opportunity that I've been able to grow up in being in the U.S. But by God, I need an air conditioner and also a clothes dryer.
Yes. Oh my God, terrible to do your laundry and then come down the next day, it's still drying.
Yeah. I don't mind doing the dishes by hand.
Yeah.
I honestly think sometimes that's more efficient than just like sitting and having it wait and stuff like that. But a clothes dryer, please.
Yes.
What I would give to be able to have been able to have had that on some of my trips and excursions would have been a miracle. Instead of being like, it's less damp, I guess we can put it on.
Let me get my hair dryer and just finish it off here. Yeah.
Exactly. So Malvika, tell us about, you had this wonderful experience, and of course you have since graduated from the University of Iowa, but what are you doing right now? What is going on with Malvika Khadiya? What does she want the world to know?
Ooh, good question. It's going to be nothing too exciting right now, but let's see. I work in town as a legal clerk, so been learning new things there. I tutored the LSAT a bit, but this fall I'm going to be starting law school, so I am excited for that. That's going to be a fun new step to take.
Have you made a decision on where law school is going to be?
Not yet, but soon, I think.
We are all waiting in suspense to hear that.
Yes.
All right. So final question. Here it is. I've been waiting.
All right.
What is the one song that defined your study abroad, and specifically where is this wonderful little Slipknot connection coming from?
All right. And I'm going to give you two. I'm going to cheat.
All right.
So the first one, and this one's going to be so random, but it's Gasolina.
Oh, okay.
Here's why, is because we were in, again, everything's unfamiliar to us. Didn't know like a ton of Russian music, definitely didn't know Latvian music, but every time we were out at like a club or something and Gasolina came on, everybody knew it. And so when I think about, especially like in Riga and some of those moments, I'm like, it was just such a fun thing to see, everybody being that like shared experience. My Slipknot song, it's called Ulibaisia, which means like smile, like as a command, like smile, by a band called Iowa. And
wow.
The way I encountered this is one of our first assignments in class was a presentation. You had to do 2 Russian songs, any 2. So I was poking around, and I knew this band existed, and I'd kind of forgotten about it, and I came across one of their songs on YouTube, and I was like, oh, this sounds fun. Why are they called Iowa? And so I went and looked it up, and it turns out that the members of the band are from Russia and like Belarus. They're huge fans of Slipknot. And apparently Slipknot had an album called Iowa, and so they named themselves after that.
Wow.
And so I was like, this is a no-brainer. I have to do one of their songs for this presentation. Guys, that's where I'm from. And people in the U.S. sometimes don't even know Iowa. I was like, what is this like Belarusian Russian band named Iowa? And then for the song itself, I will say it's just about like letting go of control. It's like be happy and stuff. And I think that that's something that I noticed, and it was an attitude that people had almost everywhere in Latvia. Some mix of like being optimistic and just like the Russian kind of fatalism of just like, don't sweat things, it's fine. People were like, I would say almost like unshakable sometimes, and I thought it was strange. But that's something I've tried to adopt in my own, life since I came back, is just, don't sweat the small stuff. Like things will go wrong, it's fine, everything works out. But yeah, there's the Slipknot connection is the band, and I had such a great time telling my class about that. I was like, guys, you're not going to believe why they're called Iowa.
Well, were you so worried that it was going to be one of the days where you had to switch notebooks and then you weren't going to be able to do your own presentation about Iowa?
That would have been so sad because there was nobody else from Iowa in our cohort. But luckily, it was one of our slideshow presentations, so I got to be in control of that one.
It was
Thank
your
goodness.
Moment.
It was. I'd been waiting for that. Yes.
The Latvia-Iowa crossover arc needs to be studied. Well, Malvika, this has been a really fun, kind of out of the ordinary episode with what we usually do. I am so appreciative and thankful that you have come on. And for anyone interested in CLS, I will link that program down below. As always, talk to the people here at the university. And if you're studying one of these languages that is considered critical, you should definitely do this and take this opportunity. So thank you so much for listening. We will see you wherever and whenever in the world next time.